Hi. Okay, I'll hang up. Okay, I want to go through your paper, and you can hear me, right? So I opened up your paper already and my comments that I wrote on it. So make sure I share the screen and do that. So go share screen, and I think that's the paper. Yeah. Okay. So you can see the screen there, and okay. And so I think I hung up. I thought I hung up here. Just a second. I thought I hung up. Okay. Okay. So all right. So it says here that Zinn, who claims a completely different perspective on American history, divides dichotomously. Let me say this again, just in case I make more changes. So it's always good to do that anyway. And so I just go 2 here, and you write claims a completely different perspective on American history, divides dichotomously, unlike Flynn. In one historical event, there are rulers and subjects, and the United States has been confined to the rulers. By comparison, Flynn recognizes that there are rulers and subjects, but does not clearly limit the United States to one category. Consider, for example, the Indian Removal Act. If the United States only sees the act of driving the Indians west and stealing their homes, there are rulers from the perspective of Zinn. Yeah, you need that there. So just go here and that. However, Flynn considers why the United States had no choice but to drive out the Indians, and concludes that it was to protect its citizens. In this case, the United States is not just a rule. That's interesting, because it sounds like to me that you're seeing more complexity. I mean, you're saying that Daniel Flynn, is seeing more complexity in American history than is Howard Zinn.
Yeah.
In terms of okay, I see that. I don't know if that's what when you read the whole article by Daniel Flynn, one of his main themes that comes up from that article in critiquing Howard Zinn is that he says that Howard Zinn's book and the ideas of his followers, his students and teachers who use Howard Zinn, is to make the students feel ashamed of their country. Mm-hmm. Like he's somehow worried, I guess, and that is not. I guess that's not necessarily in conflict with seeing complexity, because I don't know. Howard Zinn's been dead for 11 years, right? So we can't really ask him his opinions, but he might well. Do you think Howard Zinn would say his intent is to make students feel ashamed of their country?
I think reading his book, I felt like that. You should shame.
Yeah, I think again, it's difficult to say. And by the way, this is being recorded, so I will upload the recording to YouTube and send you the link if you want to watch it again. But I think Zinn would say his intention is not to make American students feel ashamed of their country. Mm-hmm. His intent is to make the American students see more complexity in their history. He's claiming that, I think he would say, I can't be certain, but I think he would say that American students, and not just American students, it can be Chinese students and Russian students, that they are raised and socialized by the society in which they're born and educated to be obedient citizens who obey the commands of the authorities, even if those authorities are refusing to act to protect or promote the substantial real rights of all Americans, including those people who are born into groups of society that traditionally have been marginalized, like Black people, Hispanic people. And so if we want to address the problems in American society, and there are many, many problems in American society, American students, American citizens have to break away from this mindset or this worldview in which they are taught that American history is a history of heroes who accomplished great things, and you only learn about the great things, and you don't learn about the bad things. You don't learn about the bad things that Christopher Columbus did. You don't learn about the bad ways that George Washington acted. And so if you don't learn about the bad or the questionable actions and their true motivations behind their behaviors, then a person is more likely to believe that what exists today in 2021 in the United States, in the year 2021, is right and just and good. And if somebody is in prison, if somebody's poverty-stricken, if somebody is poor, it's their fault. It's all their fault. It's the fault, or it's their fault of their family, their parents. And so because they're taught that they tend to be taught that American leaders have not made terrible mistakes or or acted in questionable ways. I think that's what Howard Zinn would deny. That I think if he were alive, he would deny that he's trying to brainwash students. He's saying they're already brainwashed. What we need to do now is to show them an alternative viewpoint so they can compare those viewpoints. And so that they can, and understand also perhaps how change happens. America improves not because big, powerful white men, rich, powerful white men feel bad and decide to give better things or improve the situation of poor people. It's because poor people fight. It's the marginalized, the oppressed people organize their efforts, resist and struggle. And yeah, the sympathy of powerful people is important. I mean, like, we haven't talked about the later 20th century American history, but in my life, when I was a young child in the 1960s, a very small child, the United States government adopted civil rights legislation to protect the civil rights of African Americans and others. And John Kennedy was the president who started that, really pushed that when he was elected in 1960. He wanted to do it, but he couldn't politically do it. He couldn't do it because there was too much political resistance. And then he was killed, murdered by Lee Harvey Oswald. And then his vice president uses the anger and sadness and fury against that murder, in part to pass that civil rights legislation that Kennedy had always wanted, as partly a collective action of mourning. But more importantly, also, it was during the Cold War. It was during the Cold War when the Americans were fighting. Now they're starting to fight in Vietnam. And the Soviet Union is telling the world the American system is bad. Look how the Americans treat their black people. Look at how they treat people who are not white. But we communists in the Soviet Union, we have solved the problem of racism. Look what we are doing in Cuba. Look what we are doing in other countries. We're overcoming the racism. So you people in Africa and Asia, you should like communism better than capitalism. And so there were all of these factors that came together that explain why the powerful, rich establishment government and the authorities that support the government of the United States decided and agreed and to accept the demands and to respond positively to the demands to make positive changes in the form of civil rights legislation. Now, if they had resisted, they could have resisted, right? If there was opposition. So I'm not. You do need sympathetic, powerful people to achieve your objectives, but they can't do it on their own. They need political support, deep political support within society, pressure, demands, being organized to be able to act on their sympathies, and they can't just do it because they want to be nice guys. And so I think that's what Zinn is trying to highlight, that if you don't organize, if you don't struggle, if you don't fight, human rights do not expand. But I think, my sense of Flynn is that Flynn, he's really focused upon this notion that people like Howard Zinn are undermining the support of the American political system among young people, and that they are that people like Zinn and his followers, his students, his teachers that follow after Zinn are making America weaker, because they are they are the traditional values that are associated with the foundation of American identity, like family, like capitalism, like small government, that those traditional values that we call the American creed, although Flynn does not use that term, that those values are what made America so powerful around the world today. And they're being threatened by people like Zinn and their philosophy. And they are the source of weakness, of social breakdown, of weakness in America. When America is confronting, for example, Islamists or China, where there's always threats. Okay, the Soviet Union is gone. 30 years ago, the Soviet Union is gone, but there are other problems like China, like for example. And so that's my sense of what's going on here. We only have another 20 minutes here, so I want to make sure that I give you the chance to make sure that you can ask me any questions. Yeah, I gave you check plus, so that's a good first draft. So and so this sort of summarizes what I've just been saying here in my comments, right? That so, for example, Zinn might point out that we just take for granted that, of course, women should have the right to vote. Of course, but no, it wasn't just because. That had to be fought for. That had to be struggled for. People had to make that happen. And of course, there were sympathetic, powerful white men who agreed, but there are also a lot of powerful white men who disagreed. And so what we accept as natural, normal, it wasn't accepted as natural and normal 200 years ago. And we can't accept it, for example, let's take something that's very, very personal, right? In South Korea, access to abortion is still illegal. In the United States, it was legalized through Supreme Court ruling in 1973, so almost 50 years ago, 48 years ago. And so for some people in America, it's just natural, of course, a woman should have the right to have access to abortion services because it's her body, but for other people, they feel just as strong that that fertilized egg in a woman is a baby, is a human being, and you cannot kill it. And then there's all of these assumptions, unspoken assumptions there about what is right and wrong, what is a good person, what is a good woman. Like, what are women doing, having sex without being adequately prepared, or what are they doing having sex for enjoyment? Are you not supposed to do that? Oh, men, of course, we understand. And Korea, of course, Koreans know this stereotype that we expect men, because men are men. Yeah, they're supposed to, enjoy those kinds of things. Women, no. And so there's all of these deep assumptions that often are unspoken that people become very emotional about, because they're about what I understand it means to be an American or a Korean man or an American man or a Korean woman or Korean man. What is a good woman was a good man. And so, but again, 200 years ago, people felt the same way about women having the right to vote or Black people being equal to white people. And of course not. No. It's just obvious, so, and people fought about these things. Now we just all accept that women should have the right to vote. But there are some things that in terms of civil and justice rights, like access to abortion, people still get very excited about and very conflictual about. And we're watching what's going on in the United States today because those rights, that presumed constitutional right for a woman to have access to abortion might well be taken away in the next couple of weeks here with the new Supreme Court of the United States, with 3 new justices on the US Supreme Court that Trump nominated and got confirmed. And that's even relevant also, again, for understanding what happened in the United States in the past. Right after this, so we've gotten through the Civil War in the class, right? And then after the Civil War, we talked about in American history, there's a period called Reconstruction, in which the United States is reconstructed after the American Civil War, so the Reconstruction period. And for that brief period of time, from 1865 until 1877, Black people were elected to government. Black people became governors, senators of their states in US Congress. There was a Black senator from Mississippi. There were Black governors of states. And then, and so, you know, after 800,000 people die in the Civil War, and who knows how many people wounded, after all that destruction, finally we win, the North wins the war. They abolish slavery, they pass these constitutional amendments, they try to, you know, really make Black people feel, actually be equal. And then after 1877, it collapses because there's so much resistance. And those achievements for Black people are taken away. So that by 1900, 1910, there were no elected Black officials. Black people couldn't even vote. They took away, not officially, but they used law to control Black people, so that basically Black people were unable to vote. And so, like I think I told you, in one point in 1940 or 1930 in Louisiana, something like a total of only, according to one book I have here on my shelf, something like 500 Black people voted in the whole state of Louisiana in one election, even though they're like 1/3 of the population. And so it can happen again if you just assume that, you know, women should have the right to control their body, women should have the right to access to abortion, you know, and it's just assume that's natural. You can't just assume just because it's natural that you'll keep that right, because we've seen it happen in the past regarding Black people and their rights. Now, of course, the world's a different place today. You know, now we have Facebook and we have naver and we have smartphones and we have 24-hour communication, and they would never dare take away those, I mean, because there's too much attention, too much media coverage. But, well, I mean, like Mark Twain said, the American author, right, that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. So if they take away, for example, the constitutional right for women in America to get an abortion, they're not going to probably just take it away. What they're going to do is they're going to allow the states of the United States to adopt restrictions that let abortion remain, but make it impossible, basically, in reality, for women to be able to access abortion. At least for, I mean, I remember even as a small child, I remember, you know, I was born in 1962. And so I would come home from school and I would watch, what do you call them in Korean, soap operas? Like, you know what soap operas are? Those melodrama, television melodramas, you know, they're very popular. So they've had those forever in the US, right? And I remember watching them. They had stories about women who, this is like 1970, 71, women who would go to New York State, because New York State was one of the only states that had legal abortion. So if you were a rich woman, white woman, if you got pregnant and you wanted abortion, you could go to New York, or you could go to Mexico, or you could go to Canada, someplace and get an abortion. But for poor people that don't have money, that can't fly to New York, that can't leave their job to go spend 2 weeks getting an abortion, they will end up, you know, so that may well be what we will see happen. That technically, everybody will have the right to an abortion. Women will have the right to abortion, but they will pass laws that in effect make it almost impossible for anybody but the most powerful and rich women to get an abortion. And that will be something like what happened after Reconstruction collapsed. Technically, Black people still were officially equal, but not really. And so that's the lesson I think that Zinn is trying to get across, that positive social change and the expansion of human rights to women, to Black people, happens through struggle. And struggle never stops. And what we assume to be natural today wasn't assumed to be natural 200 years ago, right? Like the right to workers for certain basic welfare protections on the job, the right to a certain minimum wage. Those things were all fought for, a certain minimum wage. Things that we just assume are natural are made by people. And I think that's what Zinn is claiming, that the American typical viewpoint doesn't emphasize. And it doesn't emphasize it because they don't want to emphasize it, because they want people to be obedient and obey when the government tells them to do something. And now, what do you think Flynn would disagree with what I said?
I think Flynn has Flynn, I think as I wrote, Flynn criticized Zinn as he wrote his American history in his taste. So I think Flynn will not agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Flynn goes further. He says that Zinn doesn't teach anything about the American achievements. He doesn't talk about enough about American achievements. He doesn't talk about America's success in putting a person on the moon. He doesn't talk about well, I guess I think I'm trying to, at the same time I'm talking to you, I'm trying to think about what's going on today in the United States. And you see this criticism of Zinn, even though he's been dead for 11 years, by Donald Trump and others. And that's continuing right now, that the Republican Party governments in the American government of states, the American states, the United States, those states that are controlled by Republican parties, they're trying to pass laws regarding the education systems in those states. And those laws all show the same kind of form, because they come from a set of Republican intellectual centers, policy and analysis institutes that. So the Ohio, Texas, Florida, they're all considering the same kinds of laws, and they're trying to pass laws forbidding the teaching of what they call critical race theory. And critical race theory, they say, aims to intends or affects to make American white students in schools feel bad about themselves, feel bad about being white, but feel ashamed about what what white people have done, and that they're somehow that they need to be prepared to atone, to pay a price in order to rectify the crimes against Black people and Hispanic people and Indian people in the past. So they're passing laws that say that very explicitly, that teachers may not teach critical race theory, because critical race theory makes American white children feel bad about being white, and that goes back to Flynn. Flynn was, I think he's still. I know he's still around, but his history goes back to. Well, he's younger than me, but this movement of American national white conservative hostility goes back to the 1970s, 1980s. And it goes back to the defeat of the United States in the Vietnam War. And then the humiliations that the United States experienced in the 1970s with the defeat of the Vietnam War, the expansion of the Soviet Union into new countries. So Soviet Union got new allies and friends in Somalia, in Ethiopia, in Angola, in Mozambique, in Grenada, in Nicaragua, and so on. And there was this what we call neoconservative reaction that hated Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was the president. He's still alive. He's almost 100. Where Jimmy Carter was promoting a new kind of American policy focused on human rights in the world, rather than the Cold War and the Soviet Union and containment of the Soviet Union. And there was this and Ronald Reagan exploited that hostility and resentment, and that many Americans felt that they felt that their country was losing. It was weak economically. There was high inflation. There was humiliations. The Iranian Revolution led to the seizure of the American embassy personnel in 1979, and they were held for 444 days, and the Americans couldn't get them out. And the expansion of communism in other countries of the world, and Ronald Reagan emerged around that, because they claimed, the supporters of Ronald Reagan, that America had lost the will and determination to resist the forces of evil in the world, and because of democratic leader mistakes like Lyndon Johnson and Jimmy Carter's mistakes, and that Ronald Reagan represented the resurgence of American will and pride in America and will to resist. And then, of course, we saw what happened. Ronald Reagan gets elected, and then by 1985, into his second term, Mikhail Gorbachev becomes leader of the Soviet Union. And then 6 years later, the Soviet Union is gone. And people, and they credit Ronald Reagan. People like Daniel Flynn credit Ronald Reagan for that. Not Jimmy Carter, not Lyndon Johnson, not John F. Kennedy. Ronald Reagan and the Republican Party and white, well, he wouldn't say white, but conservative nationalism, conservative pride. That's why the Soviet Union went poof. And certainly not thanks to Howard Zinn. Howard Zinn, this happened in spite of Howard Zinn and his weakening of American pride and therefore American will to fight again. In spite of these people, Howard Zinn and the weakeners of American will and determination to be what they call a city on the hill, a beacon that represents freedom and ideals for the whole world, for Koreans, Europeans, Asians, the whole world looks to America. And Howard Zinn doesn't want to talk about that. Howard Zinn doesn't want to talk about America's successes. Howard Zinn doesn't want to talk about America's achievements. He only wants to talk about the bad things that rich white people did in America. But that's not what saved the world from communism. It was America's achievements, America's example, and those people who acted on that. Ronald Reagan. And yeah, we had to do some bad things, in the 1980s. But the Soviet Union was a Russian version of Nazi Germany trying to conquer the world, supposedly. And America stopped it. And it stopped it because America's great, not sick, the way Howard Zinn implies. So, do you have any questions?
For the final draft, I should add more information or something.
No, I think it's okay. I mean, make sure that you don't go over 550 words in terms of total text of the paper, of the body of the paper. Mm-hmm. Make sure try to improve your writing by not using contractions, mm-hmm. and don't use first person, I, me, my.
Yeah.
Just make your statement. You don't say I didn't think, or I think, or I think. Don't say I think. Just make the statement and prove it. You'll use less words when you do that.
Yeah.
And your writing will be more concise. So okay.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, let me go ahead and close that and send that to you. So I go back to sent, and I go like this, and I go reply, and I go like this, and I go here, and I go here, go like that. Okay, go like that, and I hit send. Here it is. Okay. All right. See you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.